What's up? Welcome to another episode of What's Up Conversations, a podcast with iconic and inspiring storytellers in video game and film industry. I'm your host, Hamid Reza Nikufar, and in this episode, I have the best director of 2021 as my guest. He's the mega talented director of Deathloop and one of the kindest people in the industry. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest is no one but Dinga Bakaba, studio director at Arkane Studios. In this episode, we talk about Dinga's background, the journey of becoming a game director, his first games, and a deep discussion about the immersive sim philosophy and his view on making immersive and different games. Before we begin, please make sure to subscribe to What's Up Conversations or wherever you're listening to the podcast. To learn more about the podcast and my future guests, you can visit nikufarmusic.com and follow me on Twitter at @hrnikufar. Many thanks to Emma Domery for making the video version of this conversation. Thank you very much. Let's have fun. Hello and welcome to What's Up Conversations, Dinga. Congratulations on Deathloop and you winning the best director of at Game Awards. So
thank you.
Yeah. How does it feel to walk around as the best video game director in the world?
Well, first of all, it's just it's an award, so it's a game. So sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. This year it's my year, but I'm so first of all super happy because it is like my first game as a director. So definitely, as you can imagine, it was extremely challenging. Big moments of doubt, big moments of wondering whether we took the right decision, especially for a game like this, because this is definitely a game that is quite unique in many ways, right? Yeah. And when you're charting new territory, it's of course always more challenging. So the fact that it ended up with a satisfying game for the players makes myself and Sébastien, my co-creative director, very very happy. But since you mentioned the other directors in the industry, I think this year was extremely rich in very diverse experiences, be it in AAA and indie. So I was super proud, and I'm super proud to get that we get nominated among those folks, and I got this one. They got others.
It was a great year, and so makes the victory even sweeter, I guess. So look, this is beautiful. You winning an award, and it's so inspiring. A lot of game developers out there are looking up to you and like, oh man, I want to be that guy one day. So to understand this success story, let's loop back and talk about your past. Tell me about your childhood. How was it, and how did you get into the game industry?
So, my first, really important contact with video games is when my parents gifted me, I don't remember if it was Christmas or a birthday, but they gifted me a computer, basically an Amstrad CPC 464, the cassettes, it was reading cassettes at the time. Of course, they were hoping that I would work with this computer, I guess, and become super smart, and the main thing was there was games on it, and that immediately blew my mind. So I was, I guess in a way that maybe movies or the first time some actors or directors see a movie and they're like, this is what I wish for, but very quickly I was in school and I was very passionate by it, but very quickly people start telling you, are you good at math? Because you have to be good at math to do those things. And I'm like, no. Are you good at drawing? Because, maybe if you're a good artist, maybe, no. So, for a very long time, it just seemed like something that was impossible, at the same level as being an astronaut or a rock star, And so I wasn't really working towards that. Actually, I was very, um, it was very tough for me looking for my future because a lot of my teachers were saying, yeah, this kid has some capabilities, but he doesn't seem like he's working for something, right? Because I had no goal, like I had no dream, because my dream was impossible. Like retrospectively, that's what I understand. So, but still, always playing games, and when my parents didn't have money to buy games, which was most of the time, reading about games in magazines. Piracy was also actually a great source of play. It's sad, but it's the truth. So I played games all my life, and when I got to my 20s, I had dropped out of school. I didn't know what to do, and various circumstances led me to say, okay, I have to do something with my life. And at that moment, reading a review, I think, of a game, I read the term game designer, which usually, especially in France, we call developers programmers, like the programmers made the game, right? And I was like, what's a game designer exactly? And so I Googled it, or Yahoo'd it probably at the time. And someone who makes the rules of the game. And that sounded like something I would be into, right? And so that was really eye-opening as, okay, maybe that's possible. And that led me to start a game design school, which was extremely expensive. So my parents couldn't pay for more than 1 year. But it was, I still did a lot of reading, because I was lucky enough that I had English. My father taught me English at home. So I could read design books in English, design blogs, and so I learned a lot about design, but again, couldn't finish my education. And again, a few years later, this is probably not possible for me. I don't see how I could enter this industry. At some point, I did a crazy, what? I don't know what to do with my life. I was doing basically nothing, like small jobs. I worked in a kebab. And at some point, because it was important for me, I just had became a dad, and I wanted the best for my daughter. So I tried my chance. It was really, let's shoot for the stars, as they say. Like I will try my dream, and when that's not possible, I do something else. So I was lucky enough to find a job as a tester for on mobile games, and from there I managed to get an internship, like a kind of a bullshit internship, because I was not at school, but it was a way of getting into a company as a game designer, and then made my way until where I am now. So I think I'm probably skipping some things, because of course I always liked, like even before I knew about game design, I always liked tweaking rules of board games or card games like Magic. I always liked making my own mods for Space Crusade or Warhammer games, etc. I always loved the rules and tweaking them and modifying them for others, to have others have a good time. Same thing. Even before I started in the industry, of course, tools like Unreal and Unity were not as popular at the time, but there was a level editor in Tony Hawk, one of the Tony Hawk games, I think Tony Hawk 2, that I immediately started making skate parks and making my friends come to my house to try them. Started dabbling a little bit with game editors, with games that shipped with one, like Neverwinter Nights at the time, or The Elder Scrolls, actually. Morrowind. So it was. I never released a mod, but I always liked tinkering with those things, which really helped later on as a designer. So as you can see, it's not a straight line.
Yeah.
That got me there, definitely.
Especially back in those days where, I don't know, in France, but there were like a course or a university education to just learn these things. I mean, most gamers back then didn't know who's designing these, how these things are made.
Yeah.
Now, internet magazines are explaining the whole process, and
it's much better
right now sharing your information. Someone's listening to this, hopefully, and like, yeah, I gotta get into modding. Yeah.
Well, actually, it goes beyond modding. Actually, it's. And that's something that I say to aspiring designers or even developers in general. Don't start until you're out of school, because training is cool as well. Like it won't land you a job most of the times, but it's important just for things like knowing the nomenclature of things, starting to build a kind of network, of people. So, video game education has its purpose, but a common mistake that people make is, I will start making games when I'm at a video game studio.
Exactly.
That's the biggest mistake.
Yeah.
Start making shit before it's because the difference between someone that is out of school, that has their student project, okay, maybe it's cool. I don't know exactly what you did on it, even if you can, because it was okay, sure, maybe that's cool. But your teachers helped giving feedback, so it's not the same thing as they have that, and on top of that, they have a portfolio, basically. And that portfolio shows a passion for something.
Yeah.
Like I like this type of game. I like this type of writing. I like this type of concept art. And that tells me a lot more in an interview than I went to that school. And same for people who have absolutely no education and no experience in the games industry. If you come with something that shows that you can do things, and those things, like I don't know if it's still the case, but for a very long time at Bethesda Game Studios, one of the ways to apply is do something with our tools.
Yeah.
Because then we know you can do. We know you can be just efficient if you impress us with something you did, and on top of that with our tools, because they are public.
Exactly.
Then, so it's very important.
You can easily hire a level designer that way. Like, hey, with your tools, I designed this level. Check it out. Yeah, don't need anything else. Yeah. So and especially especially considering the fact that you're a unique game developer, you're a unique game designer. Because seriously, your taste is different. So you're one of the champions of the immersive sim genre. Looking back at your career, do you think Arkane made you passionate about these type of games, or the interest was mutual from the beginning?
So first of all, this type of game, for me, the interest really started. Like looking back, I was interested in simulation heavy games, but the first time that I have a real contact with this genre is Ultima Underworld.
Yeah,
it's a game that when I played it, it was at my cousin's place. It blew my mind, because it was about telling people my story in the game, what happened to me, and not what's happening to the character. If you get my meaning.
Exactly.
That's a huge difference. I'm not telling you about in Monkey Island, wasn't it funny when we did when Guybrush does that or that and blah blah blah. That's something that it's cool, because you share the same experience with another player. But with something like Underworld, it was about my discovery. I tried this. Did you see that? Can you do this, etc., etc. That was extremely empowering and extremely strong. And the funny thing is that I discovered Ultima Underworld at the very same time that I discovered Wolfenstein 3D. Like that same afternoon, my cousin was like, I have 2 new games. And those were the 2 games we tried. And somehow the mix between a shooter, because Wolfenstein blew my mind as well, like the fluidity, the visceral combat, the gore, like the violence, all those things, plus the thematic, of course. All those things made those games extremely, have a very strong impact on my appreciation of video games in general as a medium. So somehow, as I grew up, every time there was a game that had a little bit of that underworld agency and a little bit of that Wolfenstein, it's an action game DNA, I was immediately in love. Be it not in chronological order, but some games that were very important for me were the Starbreeze games, for instance. Riddick and the Darkness.
Exactly.
Of course, Deus Ex. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodline is one of my favorite games of all time.
Thief.
Every time. Thief, yes. Like I discovered it with Deadly Shadows, which is not the best one, but still, same thing. Like I that's the thing. You're in that world, and it's also an action game. It's not just stats. That it's your choices and your actions and using the systems that in a kind of I'd like to say tactile way almost with the world that made it interesting to me. And one of those games that I really loved was Dark Messiah of Might and Magic. I kind of skipped Arcs at the time because I was too busy playing Oblivion, which is also one of the games I would mention as having those characteristics, right? And I think that Dark Messiah caught me by surprise because I knew the Might and Magic franchise. I didn't really research the game before acquiring it. And I popped it, and it was not the Might and Magic I know. Like I said, I'm one character. Oh, it's kind of more Half-Life, but with even more freedom than Half-Life, and all this physics and still some RPG mechanics, and that was fantastic. So there was making of the game, and for one of the first time I was like, okay, you know what, I'll watch this because this is amazing. And I figured out that those guys were French in Lyon.
Yeah.
And I think that was before I applied to this game design training that I mentioned. I think that made it somehow accessible to me. It's not just that you can make a game in this country, it's you can make a game that is a dream game for me, honestly, in this country. And since that moment, I think when I entered the industry, Arkane was always something, a company I dreamed to work at because of this, and I remember when I left France, because I worked in the Netherlands at PlayLogic before it closed. When I left France, one of my goals was I will try to get some experience on AAA games and game editors. And with that, I will apply to Arkane, because I didn't want to apply to Arkane without something solid. Because I didn't want to get a no from one of my dream studios, right? So, and interestingly, that's kind of how it happened, except that when PlayLogic closed, my manager at the time, Olivier Lermite, was from Lyon, and he knew Raph, and he, because the company was closing, he tried to, to help me out. So he made a recommendation for me. So I had this interview, and when I arrived at Arkane, it was definitely my dream job. And I will be honest, and I'm not being cheesy about it, it is still my dream job. years, 12 years after that, I'm still at my dream job.
So and that's a perfect marriage, because I was talking to Rafael Colantonio, founder of Arkane, and he mentioned exactly the same games you mentioned that you fell in love with, like Ultima, and that he wanted to make this a studio to make these type of games. And guess what? They found the Dinga, and it's interesting that you mentioned that there was Ultima, there was Wolfenstein, and when I played Deathloop, it's a perfect mixture of those games. And I'm a huge fan of a stealth, but in Deathloop, when it gets into action shooting, I'm like, all right, this is not as smart, but this is fucking fun, man. I want to shoot, so it works. Yeah, that's a perfect marriage between those two games.
As Colt would say, but I like shooting things.
Yeah, exactly.
So, that line is here for a reason, definitely.
Yeah, that's a war between heart and mind, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that, to be clear, I was quite happy that, we were able to do that kind of marriage. It's kind of also cool that we got the opportunity to help out on the Wolfenstein game.
Exactly.
During the development of Deathloop, that was magic for me. I can tell you that. But I'd say that where it's interesting is that even though this is my favorite genre, being immersive sims, being European, I have also a certain, for instance, affinity with I'm a big, in terms of player, I'm a big. Some people call that type of player butterflies. Like, I will see a little bit of that flower, then that flower, then that flower, then that flower. So I'm not very specialized. I play almost everything. And I have a lot of genres that I love. Action games, shooters, Japanese RPGs. Like, I have a ton of genres that I love. And the thing I like with the immersive sim as a design philosophy is that it's not a template, it's a philosophy.
Exactly,
and that philosophy, you see what I mean? Exactly. And so that's the cool thing, is this is a philosophy where you can inject some DNA, and then you experiment, and then you iterate and push and pull and push and pull, and then you end up with something very unique. And that's something that I really like to do. That's why I also think that it's the right place for me to be in, because there is this kind of adventure, and this kind of, we have values, strong values. We believe in those values. We have a legacy that we carry forward. But at the same time, we make games that are, there is also a trend of very, I would say traditional immersive sims, which is quite cool. But I like Arkane's posture, which is always try to inject new DNA and revise the formula, and that can be seen in our portfolio, because definitely Dark Messiah is just as much, if not more, an action game than Deathloop, right? Yeah. Dishonored is more on stealth. Redfall that is coming is on something else, of course. And Prey was its own thing, and Mooncrash was its own thing. So you see what I mean? There is really this, and even the games we didn't ship, like Return to Ravenholm and The Crossing, and all those projects that that are now public that the company worked on. There is always this intention of being true to ourselves, but also surprise and delight, because we're injecting something modern or something different into the formula. And that's what I'm really passionate about at Arkane.
Exactly. And it's something timeless. And I was talking to my friend the other day. I was saying that maybe immersive sim philosophy was too far ahead of its time, because, it came out like mid to late 90s, and there was some amazing games like Thief, Deus Ex Ultima, as we mentioned, but they weren't that successful financially. And then it came to 2000, when suddenly most of the games were linear, cinematic focused games. But recently it's coming back because it's giving freedom. Creating immersive worlds are completely in the line with the idea of living in another world. And especially when we look back at the past 2 years of pandemic, of being trapped in our houses, the need for escaping to another universe, another believable and maybe more exciting world has become even more essential. And suddenly there's metaverse, digital properties, and all that now. How do you see the past and the future of immersive sim and the way it's coming back in different forms and mediums?
Yeah, I think it's so I have a controversial view on that, which is part of the difficulty of immersive sim is we tried as as an industry, developers working on immersive sims, we tried to define those games too much as we tried to be too smart about it in the way we communicate about it. And that's something that we try to work a lot at Arkane since Dishonored, which is, yes, I want to tell you this is a game where you can possess a rat and go under a chair and wait for someone to come, and then you stop the time. But that's very complicated. How is that necessary? That's smart. Exactly. Everyone will agree. But is that too smart for me, and I will not have fun with it? If that's the case, I'm alienating a lot of players who could have a ton of fun with it. So that's why, with Dishonored, we found this catchphrase that is honest. It's about a badass assassin in a badass supernatural assassin in a steampunk city. That's something that tells me why it might be exciting without delving too much into the complexities, because we are developers. We like to say how, to talk about what we do, but how does that relate to the player experience? That's something that I think Arkane has been good at doing. But before that, I think one of the turns as well was BioShock, the success of BioShock, that is so, how do you say, imbued with this immersive sim philosophy, especially again knowing the lineage of the people who worked on it, that managed to be a very mainstream success with a good communication, etc. To the point that some people don't even think of it as an immersive sim,
exactly.
Even though it's kind of the Trojan horse for us, and that opened the way maybe to us with Dishonored and other games. So I think there is a lesson here, which is, and that's what we tried to do with Deathloop, which, I mean, with Deathloop, it was counterintuitive, because at the same time we were saying, this is the weirdest shit you've seen in a while.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we were really focusing on the action, the style, the music, the fact that there is humor in it, it's not, etc., etc. So we tried to present to the players why it was exciting, more than how complex and how, that's where sometimes we feel that we are our own enemies with those discussions, because and not to compare, it's really not the same, but sometimes also the player communities, because they like those games so much that they want to surface what's absolutely unique with them first, but in a way that might alienate. If you tell me, I'm a player, I have never played an immersive sim, and I'm my favorite shooter is I don't know, Wolfenstein or Half-Life, and I tell you that, and you tell me, oh, those games are linear and they are roller coasters. I know this thing, it's much smarter. See, you have to try it. You kind of putting me in a defensive stance.
Yeah.
Like, don't tell me that Titanfall is less of a game because it's a linear game. It's one of my favorite games, the Titanfall 2 campaign, right? It is a splendid piece of video game, and it's just a different thing. So that's, I think, a challenge for both the developers and the communities to be welcoming, not be gatekeepers.
Exactly.
You see, and that's I think that's something that is evolving in the right direction, thanks to not only immersive sims and the various successes that there has been, but also different genres that are now more about player agency and freedom and starting to integrate. And I'm thinking, I always come back to Minecraft and the Minecraft generations of, the kids who grew up on Minecraft. They have a taste for emergent gameplay, emergent storytelling, freedom, agency, and simulated systems. Like there is something that is natural for those kids that are now grown up, and that probably helps with making those elements less alien and less, intellectual. Like, yeah, sure, there is some of that, but that doesn't mean that those games aren't fun, and doesn't mean that those games aren't accessible, as we've seen times and times again. And I hope that the more it goes, the less we have to have this problem. That's where I am right now. The appetite is here, but that doesn't mean that immersive sims aren't special, because that might be something, that might be some part of the gatekeeping, right? So now Metal Gear has much more. Metal Gear 5, Phantom Pain, or it has much more of those systems that you might even wonder if it doesn't qualify for an immersive sim for a number of reasons. Same for Zelda, like Japanese games. But they are very different from what we are doing. I don't think that it's a problem to say, yeah, we have our unique, very unique things, and that's what we do, I think we are past that now. Indeed, not that. I'm of course drawing extremely broad strokes here. To be fair, but that's what makes me hopeful for the future. I like the fact that even like you were talking about Raf. Like, I love the fact that Raf's game is an immersive sim that is a top-down, isometric view game, and not a first-person game. That is saying something, and that's a very immersive sim. I will only say that. So that's the thing.
Exactly. The immersion can come from different sources. I mean, the multi-layered gameplay, having options, that used to be said, like it's immersive sim. But now, maybe a visual is so realistic that the immersion of the visual is way more impactful than an immersive sim, the freedom you have in the gameplay. So it's a matter of words. So
you could even say any VR game is more immersive than an immersive sim. So what are we looking for with immersive? So that's the thing. It has even started to be like, we have to be careful about nomenclatures, because immersive sim, it's a philosophy. It's not about, it's a game that has simulation and is immersive, because that's too surface level a descriptor, I would say, for this philosophy at least. I have felt very engaged in where there is some cutscenes, but those cutscenes, not only don't disturb me, but they were actually,
adding to the experience.
Adding to the experience. It's really a matter of execution, because you mentioned it. Some of those stories are not that interesting. Yep. The dialogue is not that interesting, and the writing is not that interesting. So I think it's a matter of execution, because my feeling with that is, I mean, Deathloop, that's a game where that's an example of a game we've barely, like, there is very, very few cutscenes, right?
Yeah. But they're so stylish and fucking fun, man. Gotta give it to you guys. So beautiful.
That's the thing. The few blocking moments, we tried to make them special. But I think it's the thing where I respect a game that doesn't remove control from me from beginning to end. I respect that, and there is a lot of games that I love that do that. A lot. There is some games that I love that do that. But it's a matter of. Actually, I give you an example. Close to the family example, which is the Wolfenstein games. Like, I think that the recent ones, I mean the Machine Games one, I think that the writing, the transition between cutscene and gameplay, just the execution is so interesting, and it's so key to the experience that they managed to craft with those games, that this is definitely one where it felt natural. It felt, basically, how can I say that? It felt like a natural extension of the storytelling that was happening in the game. In some game, that's where I draw the line. If it feels natural, if it's because I will give you a counter example, because I had this discussion very recently. I'll give you a counter example of a game where like one game that I love this year, and I was not necessarily expecting to love, is Guardians of the Galaxy.
Oh my God.
I actually
Awesome.
very satisfied with this game. Yeah, like extremely satisfied with it. And the interesting thing is, each time someone asks me what I prefer the most about it, well, definitely I like the world building, I like the art, but man, I have to say the narrative is definitely the reason why most of us are in love with this game. And the interesting thing is that one of the few gripes I had with the game is that I love the fact that a lot of those conversations happen during gameplay or during exploration or on the ship in a way that is, how can I say, very integrated. And for 90% of the cases, it works perfectly, and I'm perfectly happy doing my thing and hearing those guys, trash talk each other, and it's fun and it's great. There is a couple of occurrences where it actually created anxiety, though, where I would have been thankful for what Raf mentioned. I would have been thankful for, you know what? I'll take control away from you now so you can focus on this conversation. And so you don't have the fear of missing out of, what if I just keep walking and then I lose a cool bit of conversation? It's a first world problem. It basically means that their dialogue is so rich and so cool that I don't want to miss it. But in a few cases, I was having a little bit of anxiety when those conversations were happening during gameplay, where I basically stopped playing in effect.
Exactly.
So that's the weird paradox of removing players. So that's the thing. I think where it elevates your storytelling, where it like the thing we all hate is gameplay, cutscene that moves the story, gameplay, cutscene that moves the story.
Exactly.
That I think is very. That's the thing. When people say I hate cutscenes, that's what most people target, because that's much less interesting, right?
Yeah, as you've mentioned in the Guardians of Galaxy, kind of cutscenes is like an extension of the gameplay, and the gameplay is an extension of the cutscenes. You don't see the cuts there. It's not cut, actually. No.
Yeah. And definitely I'm having as much satisfaction, because that's the thing also, because if the satisfaction is very disconnected, then it's a problem. But here I'm having a lot of satisfaction with the environmental storytelling, the reading the notes, just the scenes that are happening in the world, especially in the areas where there is friendly NPCs, etc. I'm getting so much narrative and so much satisfaction from that narrative that I don't have this way too big a gap between the narrative satisfaction of the gameplay and the narrative satisfaction of the cutscene. They kind of match, if you see what I mean.
Exactly.
And there is a last thing I hate about cutscenes, which is always troublesome, because that's sadly, I hate when a character does something in a cutscene that I cannot do in gameplay. That is something that I really resent. Like that's something that immediately makes me rage. Some of my favorite games sadly have some of that because they make you feel awesome in the gameplay, but somehow in the cutscene the character is even more awesome, or he's using verbs that are not in the gameplay, and that is also something that that is one of the reasons that's one of the things I would be looking out for someone, working with a games that is cutscene heavy, but also, and that's the thing also, like going back to what I was saying about the narrative design of Guardians of the Galaxy. Narrative design is more than dialogues.
True.
And you see what I mean? And if you love narrative, you will agree with me. Narrative design permeates every single element of the game. It's the music, it's the UI, it's the loading screen, if any, the splash screen of the game. All these things in conjunction and hopefully in harmony create the very specific brand of narrative that is unique to video games, right? And there is various ways of putting the sliders. Definitely, you can put the sliders more into cinematics. You can put the slider more into choice and consequence, making it unique. You can put the slider more into mechanics and mechanical metaphor as well, and etc. But there is so much that we can do with this medium. That's what makes our medium unique, and that's why that's why I think I was having, like, I'm a bit. I have to say that recently I have moved a little bit more into being a fan of AAA games. I don't know why, but I had a long period where I was playing almost only indie games, and that was one of the reasons. The storytelling means were much more diverse than at the time what was in the games industry. It was starting to be crusty a little bit and be a bit predictable. I think now it came to a moment where I think in AAA games we can have very good surprise. Not to take away from the indie games, because my game of the year, my personal game of the year last year was The Forgotten City, which I loved for, again, storytelling and thematic reasons. Yeah. So it's always a balancing act, but that's what I think. I think video games and there is still a lot to discover about storytelling and about emotions and how to trigger those emotions. Like you think you have everything figured out, and suddenly you play Nier Automata, and suddenly you're like, okay, I know nothing about video games and what they can do. Right?
I had Ken Levine on the podcast, and we were talking about the storytelling in Bioshock, and he said he didn't want any cutscenes, so he approached it like the story is a play, it's a theater, and when you play, it's one of the best stories in video games history, and there's no cutscenes there, and you're fully attached to the story. So every now and then, people find a new way to tell stories. Exactly. So some rapid questions before we finish this. So what's your favorite game? As you mentioned, Forgotten City. Haven't got the chance to play that. What's your favorite game of last year? Except for Forgotten City, what else?
Well, I just figured a few others. Like, I just figured that I played that game in 2021, but it's a 2020 game. 13 Sentinels, Aegis Rim, from VanillaWare. That game is blew my mind. Like it's basically a constant chain of mindfucks and plot twists. And I don't know if you played it, but it's like, what is like so unpredictable and so interesting, especially considering the very simple mechanics. Like it's a very, very good game. I loved while I was not necessarily prepared for that, but I actually loved Forza Horizon. I think the lack of friction and the pure pleasure of playing this game and the mood, and as you said, we spent a lot of time locked in our houses, and like that was extremely pleasant. I loved Returnal for the feel of the gameplay. Like I think it's one of the most tight mechanics that I've played in a long time. Really incredible. I loved what's its name? Sorry, Halo Infinite. I haven't completed the campaign, so I cannot too much comment on that. But the multiplayer got me back into playing multiplayer games. With my. I think it's really like it's really satisfying. Like I don't know. I haven't spent too much time trying to dissect why I feel it's so awesome and so pleasant, but I'm having so much fun in this multiplayer. It's really good. So I love that. Well, I'll be completely honest, and I'm not being cheeky about it, but Deathloop, like I was actually surprised that I had so much fun. Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest, you have worked on a game for years, and then you play it on your console, and some people, like some developers have this where they cannot play their games because they see only the problems. I don't have this problem. I'm fine with problems. That's what it means. Like I'm fine with imperfection. Like that's how I survive as a developer. Else it's a hard life. So I'm fine with imperfection as long as it makes me feel things and it has, there is some. And actually, I had so much fun with the finished product. I know I worked on it, but it's kind of those moments where you think that the thing you're playing is the thing you did. Is bigger than yourself, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Because it went much farther than I had a lot of fun, even knowing the story, even knowing the environments. But the game is so generous that there was things I forgot about. There was things I didn't see during my playtests. And of course, there was the invasion that we could only test in a limited capacity during development. And now I was able to invade or be invaded by random folks. And, it worked even better than I hoped it would. So that was cool.
Yeah.
And lastly, because that's always one that I forget when I mention my favorite games. Again, it's a matter of where you start and stop the year, but Cyberpunk 2077. For all that has been said about this game, I think people are forgetting how much of a fantastic experience it is overall. Like, I come from a time where games were imperfect at launch. Like some of my favorite games that I mentioned were very imperfect at launch. And so I maybe because I'm a developer, I'm maybe able to go past this imperfection and not have it go completely in the way, of the experience. But honestly, in terms of immersion, of architecture, artistic design, and it has actually this immersive seamless quality to the gameplay. There was some things where I wasn't expecting to care about this or that character that much. I actually at some point I stopped playing and said, you know what? I'll only finish it when, not that I was having trouble, but I was always having the one day when it will be patched, and I don't know if there will be expansions or not, etc., etc. But I spent 70 hours with this version of the game and had so much for my money, right? That I'm now curious about doing the last hours with the very polished, the version that CD Projekt Red is proud of, basically. So I don't know when it will come, but that's when I will finish the game, I think. But really have to say that it's one of the most impressive games I've played in recent years, despite all that has been said about it. But I don't know. That might be an unpopular opinion, but
that game is right now in my top 10 games of all my life, man. I love that game so much. So I'm on your boat, man.
Okay.
I'm a huge cyberpunk subgenre fan, so that game is heaven for me. Yeah. So, last question, very fast. The game that you're waiting for the most.
Looking forward the most?
Yeah.
Very tough. This is a very, very, very competitive year. Not competitive necessarily industry-wise. I'm thinking as a player, competitive for my time.
Yeah.
So it's a terrible question that you're asking me. Yeah, I'm hesitating between two. I will say Weird West.
Oh my god, that's mine too. Actually, I played the game some months ago, and this game is so fucking fun, man. Can't recommend it more. Shout out to Raf and all the people at Wolfeye Studio. So all right, that's it. Thank you so much, Dinga. I love your games. I love your personality. I love the way you change the rules and respect the players by valuing their choices and play style. I see your name on a project, I buy that shit. So and unconditional love is not achieved easily. Thank you for your hard work and thank you for your time, sir.
That's very heartwarming. Thanks a lot.